My uncle managed my trust for 9 years. When I finally asked for the money, he went pale and said we need to talk. He sat me down and started with, "Your father would have wanted this." I already knew something was very wrong. I want you to imagine something for a second. You're 16 years old. You're standing in a hospital corridor at 2 in the morning, and a police officer is telling you that both your parents are dead. A lorry ran a red light on the A720. That was my life in March 2014. My name's Callum. I'm 28. I'm a paramedic in Edinburgh, and I'm posting this because last year I found out that the man my parents trusted to look after me, my own uncle, stole every penny they left behind. His reason? He said orphans don't deserve money. My parents were Ross and Ailey, both secondary school teachers in Morningside. My dad taught history. My mom taught music. They were the kind of couple who still held hands at the supermarket and embarrassed me in front of my mates by slow dancing in the kitchen on a Tuesday night. They were coming home from a weekend away in the Borders when a haulage lorry blew through a red light at a junction outside Pennycook. They died together. I don't know if that's a comfort or not. Some days it is, some days it isn't. They left me a trust, £137,400, life insurance payout, plus their savings. Every penny they'd ever put away went into an account managed by my dad's older brother, Derek. The terms were simple. Derek would manage the funds until I turned 25, then release them to me. Derek was a chartered accountant at a mid-sized firm in Stockbridge, wore a suit every day, knew his way around money. On paper, he was the perfect trustee. After the funeral, Derek and his wife Fiona took me in. I moved out of the house I'd grown up in, on a quiet street in Morningside, and into their semi-detached in Castorphine. Family friends praised Derek for stepping up. The minister at the service called him a good man. Everyone said how lucky I was. Lucky. That word followed me around for years. The truth was colder than anyone saw from the outside. Fiona made it clear from the first week that I was a guest, not family. Her son Gavin was 2 years younger than me, and he got everything first. New school uniform, new laptop for Christmas, new rugby kit every season. I got Gavin's hand-me-downs, and a look from Fiona that said I should be grateful for the roof over my head. She never hit me, never screamed. She just made sure I understood the hierarchy every single day, without raising her voice once. Derek was different. He played the part of the dutiful brother perfectly. He'd ruffle my hair in front of guests, ask about my schoolwork at dinner when Fiona's friends were over. But when it was just us, he was distant, checked out. I was a responsibility he'd accepted, not a boy he wanted. My lifeline was Nadia. She lived 3 streets away from my old house in Morningside. We'd known each other since primary school. After my parents died, her mom started having me round for dinner every Friday, without ever making a fuss about it. Just set an extra place. Nadia never once treated me like I was broken. She dragged me to the cinema, forced me to study for exams, tell me to stop feeling sorry for myself when I needed to hear it. She kept me tethered to a version of life that still felt normal. I left Derek's house at 18, studied to be a paramedic, qualified at 22, and started with the Scottish Ambulance Service. I rented a 1-bedroom flat in Leith, kept my head down, saved what I could from every paycheck. I always knew the trust was there, my safety net, my parents' final gift. I planned to use it at 25, to put a deposit on a flat of my own. Something permanent, something that was mine. There were red flags. I see them now. I didn't then. Every time I asked Derek about the trust, he'd wave me off. It's all invested. Don't worry about it. The market's complicated, Callum. Let me handle it. I stopped asking because he was the only family I had left, and questioning him felt like biting the hand that fed me. Meanwhile, things I couldn't explain kept happening. Fiona launched an interior design business in 2016. Suddenly, she had a shop front on Bruntsfield Place with her name on the door, despite never seeming to have a single client walk through it. Gavin attended George Watson's College, fees north of £14,000 a year. Derek earned a decent wage, but not that decent. I noticed. I just didn't connect it. I turned 25 in September. I let the birthday pass quietly. 3 weeks later, I sat down at my kitchen table in Leith and sent Derek a polite email. Thanked him for managing the trust all those years. Asked how we go about releasing the funds so I could start looking at flats. That email changed everything, because the reply I got back 3 days later was the beginning of the worst 6 months of my life. Derek didn't reply to my email for 5 days. I checked my inbox every morning like a teenager waiting on exam results. Then on a Tuesday evening, I got a text. Not an email, a text. 6 words. Let's chat over Christmas. No rush. I told myself that was fine. The man had a busy job. Christmas was only a few weeks away. We'd sit down with a cup of tea and sort it out like adults. Christmas came. I drove to Castorfine on the 25th like I did every year. Fiona had cooked a turkey that was too dry and smiled at me the way she always did, like I was a colleague's child she'd been asked to mind for the afternoon. Derek was tense the entire meal, kept refilling his wine glass, laughed too loud at things that weren't funny. I brought up the trust once, casually, between courses. Derek said, "Not today, Callum. It's Christmas." Fiona looked at her plate. Gavin didn't notice anything because Gavin never noticed anything that wasn't about Gavin. January. I sent a follow-up email. Polite, professional, just asking for a timeline. Derek called me that evening. His voice was strange, rehearsed. He told me the funds were tied up in a long-term investment bond, and it would take 6 to 8 months to mature. He said these words like he was reading them off a card. I didn't question it. He was a chartered accountant. He knew things about money that I didn't. I said fine, I'd wait. 6 months passed. Nothing. No update, no call, no email. I rang him in July, and he let it go to voicemail twice before picking up on the third try. I asked where things stood. He snapped at me. "Stop hounding me, Callum. I've got it handled." Then he hung up. By September, I'd been waiting almost a year. I was 26. I'd found a flat I wanted to buy in Abbey Hill. 2 bedrooms, south-facing, 10 minutes from the station. The seller wanted offers over $190,000, and I needed that trust money for the deposit. I couldn't wait any longer. I drove to Castorfine on a Saturday afternoon without telling him I was coming. Fiona answered the door. She went pale when she saw me. Actually pale, like the color left her face in real time. She let me in without a word and pointed toward the kitchen. Derek was sitting at the table with a mug of coffee and the newspaper. He looked up, and I watched something move across his face. Not surprise, dread. I sat down across from him. I said I wasn't leaving until I got a straight answer and a date. "Uncle Derek, it's been 10 months. I need a number and a date. When can I access my parents' money?" He didn't look at me. He looked at a spot just past my left shoulder. "There's been some complications with the account, Callum. The investment didn't perform the way I expected." "What does that mean? How much is left?" Long silence. Fiona had stopped moving in the hallway. I could feel her listening. "About 2,000, he said. 2,000 out of 137,400 pounds. My parents' entire life savings. Their insurance payout. Everything they'd set aside so their son would be all right. Where did it go?" And that's when Derek changed. He sat up straighter, set his jaw, looked me in the eye for the first time in a year. "I used it where it was needed, Callum. Fiona's business needed capital. Gavin needed a proper education. Your dad would have understood. He would have wanted his money going to a real family, not just one kid rattling around alone. A real family." "I was his son," I said. "His actual son." Derek said nothing. Fiona had disappeared upstairs. I could hear a door close. I sat there for a full minute, maybe longer. The kitchen clock ticked. The fridge hummed. I looked at this man who'd taken me in at 16, and I understood something I'd spent a decade refusing to believe. He never saw me as family. I was a burden they tolerated, and my parents' money was the real reason they'd opened their door. I stood up, walked out. Didn't slam anything, didn't shout. I drove back to Leith in silence with both hands on the wheel and parked outside my flat and sat in the car for an hour watching the rain hit the windscreen. That night I called Nadia. She picked up on the second ring. I told her everything. The stalling, the excuses, the 2,000 pounds, the words, "a real family." She was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then her voice changed. I'd heard Nadia laugh, cry, shout, and whisper over 15 years of friendship. I'd never heard her sound like this. Cold, precise, like someone turning a key in a lock. Don't contact him again. Don't mention solicitors. Don't mention court. Forward me every document you have. The original trust deed, any letters, any emails, bank statements if you can find them, anything. Nadia, I don't even know where to start. You don't have to. That's my job now. We're going to get every penny back, Callum. I promise you. Within 48 hours, Nadia had pulled the trust's full bank statements from the administering institution. And what she found was worse than either of us had imagined. The statements arrived on Nadia's desk on a Monday morning. Royal Bank of Scotland. Every transaction from 2014 to 2022. She called me that evening and told me to come to her office. She didn't say why. She said bring a bottle of something because I was going to need it. I sat across from her in a small conference room at her firm in Leith, and she laid the pages out across the table, one by one. 8 years of bank statements. And every single one told the same story. It started small. 500 here, 1,000 there. From 2015 onward, Derek had been pulling money from the trust like a man testing how much he could take before anyone noticed. The answer was all of it. August 2016, a lump sum of £28,000 transferred directly to Fiona Hargrave Interiors Ltd. That was the exact month Fiona opened her shop front on Brunsfield Place, the one I'd walked past dozens of times and never once seen a customer inside. My parents' money paid for those polished floors and that hand-painted sign with Fiona's name on it. From 2017 to 2021, there were recurring payments of £1,200 a month to George Watson's College, Gavin's school fees. 48 months. £57,600 of my inheritance spent making sure Derek's son had the best education money could buy. My money. For a boy who got new rugby boots every term while I wore his old ones with newspaper stuffed in the toes. In 2019, a transfer of £19,000 went to a car dealership in Newbridge. That was the year Fiona started driving a Range Rover Evoque. White. I remember it parked in the driveway at Christmas. By 2022, the account held £2,100. Total siphoned. £135,300 over 7 years. And the original trust deed that Nadia pulled from the solicitor who'd drawn it up was unambiguous. Derek was trustee with a fiduciary duty. The funds were for my sole benefit. Any withdrawal after I turned 18 required my written consent. Derek never asked me once. Not once in 7 years. Nadia sent a formal letter of demand. Derek hired a solicitor who sent back a response that made my blood go cold. The withdrawals, he claimed, were reasonable expenses incurred in the upbringing and welfare of the beneficiary. As if £28,000 to Fiona's vanity project was for my welfare. As if Gavin's school fees were somehow my upbringing. As if a Range Rover was a reasonable expense for raising an orphan they barely spoke to at dinner. Then Derek went to work on the family. He started ringing everyone. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. An aunt up in Inverness. He told them I was ungrateful. That I was dragging the family name through court over nothing. That he'd taken me in when nobody else would, and this was how I repaid him. Within a week, my phone was ringing with relatives telling me to sort it out privately. Don't air dirty laundry. Think about what your father would have wanted. Fiona took it to Facebook. She posted about people who bite the hand that feeds them and knowing who your real family is when times get hard. She never used my name. She didn't need to. Then Gavin sent me a text. Dad gave you a home when no one else would. This is how you repay him? I read it 3 times. Then I deleted it. Nadia told me to ignore all of it. She said we had an airtight case. Breach of fiduciary duty. Clear documentary evidence. She filed a claim in Edinburgh Sheriff Court for the full £137,400 plus damages and legal costs. She also told me something I hadn't expected. Fiona's interior design business had been running at a loss for years. It was technically insolvent. There were assets that could be recovered through forced liquidation if the court ordered it. I stopped answering calls from anyone with the surname Hargrave. Blocked Derek, blocked Fiona, blocked the cousins who'd chosen his side without asking me a single question. I told Nadia, I don't have a family to lose. I lost my family when I was 16. Then Patricia got involved. My mom's best friend, a retired music teacher living in Stockbridge. She and my mom had been close since university. When Patricia heard what Derek had done, she rang Nadia directly and said she wanted to testify. Patricia had been in the room when my parents drafted their wills. She'd sat at their kitchen table in Morningside while Ross and Ailey talked through the trust with their solicitor. She could confirm under oath that both my parents explicitly and repeatedly stated the money was for me and me alone. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. Patricia told Nadia something else. Years earlier, she'd asked Derek about the trust. Just checking in, making sure Callum's money was safe. Derek had looked her in the eye and said, "It's all taken care of, Patricia." Proof he knew exactly what he was doing and had been covering his tracks for years. The court date was set for the 14th of March, almost exactly 10 years to the day since I'd buried my parents. I pressed my only good suit and hung it on the back of my bedroom door. And for the first time since I was 16, I wasn't afraid. Edinburgh Sheriff Court, March the 14th. I wore my only good suit and a tie my dad had left behind, navy blue with thin silver stripes. I had kept it in a drawer for 10 years and never worn it. It felt right that day. Nadia walked beside me through the main entrance. Patricia met us in the lobby. She was 71 years old, and she'd taken 2 buses from Stockbridge in the rain to be there. She squeezed my hand and said, "Your mother would be proud of you, Callum." I nearly broke right there in the corridor. Derek was already inside. I barely recognized him. He looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him, gray-faced, thinner. He sat with Fiona and their solicitor at the opposite table and didn't look at me once. Fiona sat rigid, with her lips pressed into a line so tight they'd gone white. Nadia presented everything: the bank statements, the trust deed, a forensic accountant's report that traced every single withdrawal across 7 years. She laid it out like a surgeon, methodical, precise, no emotion, just facts and figures and dates and amounts that added up to £135,300 taken from an orphaned boy by the man sworn to protect him. Derek's solicitor tried. I'll give him that. He argued the withdrawals were spent on my general welfare during the 2 years I lived under Derek's roof. Sheriff Alistair Muir listened. Then he turned to Derek and asked him directly, "Mr. Hargrave, can you point to a single withdrawal from this trust that directly benefited the beneficiary?" Derek opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his solicitor, looked at the table, said nothing. Then Patricia took the stand. She was calm, steady. She described sitting at my parents' dining table in Morningside while my mom and dad talked through the trust with their solicitor. She described my father turning to her and saying, "If anything ever happens to us, this money is Callum's. Every penny. Promise me Derek understands that." Patricia looked across the courtroom directly at Derek. "He understood," she said. "He just didn't care." Derek's solicitor made one last attempt. He argued that housing and feeding me for 2 years constituted reasonable use of the trust funds. Sheriff Muir didn't even pause. Taking in a grieving child does not entitle you to steal his inheritance. The trust deed is explicit. The breach is clear. The ruling. Derek was ordered to repay the full £137,400 plus $24,000 in damages and legal costs, a total of £161,400. Fiona Hargrave Interiors Ltd. Was ordered into forced liquidation to help cover the debt. We stood to leave. Derek stepped toward me in the aisle. He said my name. I walked past him without turning my head, and I kept walking until I was outside in the March air with rain on my face and Nadia's hand on my shoulder. The fallout came fast. Derek and Fiona had to remortgage the house in Corstorphine. The Brunsfield shopfront closed within 3 weeks. Fiona's name came off the door, and a letting agent sign went up in the window. The relatives who'd called me ungrateful went quiet overnight. A few sent awkward texts. "Sorry, didn't know the full story. Hope you're all right." I read them. I didn't respond. Then Gavin called. He was 26 by then. He'd seen the court documents. His voice was shaking. "I didn't know, Callum. I swear, I didn't know it was your money paying for my school." He was crying. I believed him. I told him it wasn't his fault. We talked for 40 minutes. It was the longest conversation we'd ever had. Gavin stopped speaking to Derek and Fiona entirely after that. 6 weeks later, a handwritten letter arrived at my flat. 3 pages. Derek's handwriting. He said he was sorry. He said the spending got away from him. He said losing Ross was the hardest thing he'd ever been through, and he'd made terrible decisions out of grief. I read it twice. There might have been a shred of genuine remorse buried in those pages. But every time I tried to find it, I heard his voice in that kitchen in Corstorphine. A real family. Not just one kid rattling around alone. I put the letter in a drawer. I didn't reply. I used the recovered funds to put a deposit on a 2-bedroom flat in Portobello. 2nd floor, south-facing, overlooking the Firth of Forth. The day I got the keys, I stood in the empty living room and looked out at the water, and I thought about my mom and dad holding hands in the supermarket and slow dancing in the kitchen on a Tuesday night. Nadia helped me move in. She assembled the bookshelf wrong twice and blamed the instructions. Patricia came the following weekend with a framed photograph of Ross and Ailey from their wedding day. She hung it in the hallway by the front door, so they'd be the first thing I saw when I came home. I still work as a paramedic. I still live alone. But for the first time since I was 16, I have a home that's mine, built on the foundation my parents left for me. My uncle called me just one kid rattling around alone. And maybe I was for a while. But my parents didn't see it that way. They saw a son worth protecting, even after they were gone. Derek thought he could take that from me. He was wrong. If you're reading this and someone in your life is holding something that belongs to you, your money, your dignity, your peace, don't wait 10 years like I did. Fight for it. Because the people who love you, they already fought for it first.